The sweet scent of baby filled the air, but not for me. There, in the maternity ward, with a heart overflowing, I reached out my arms for my grandson, but a cold voice stopped me. We prefer that only the parents hold the baby for now. The hospital disinfectant never seemed so bitter. My joy turned to dust. I recoiled, my hands dropping. 54 years old, and once again I felt like an afterthought, an invisible presence. It wasn't just my daughter-in-law's casual dismissiveness. It was a creeping sensation, a growing certainty that the world, once so eager for my contributions, was slowly, deliberately fading me out. For 32 years, my name was Lucia, and I was the bedrock of Sterling & Co.'s finance department. I'd seen it all: market crashes, technological revolutions, a revolving door of ambitious young CEOs. I built systems, trained entire teams, and prided myself on my foresight, my unwavering dedication. My life was a meticulously balanced ledger: family first, then career, both given my all. But in the last year, the ledger had begun to tilt. The office, once a place of vibrant purpose, now hummed with a different kind of energy, one that excluded me. The scent of fresh coffee, once a morning comfort, now mingled with the faint, cold, metallic tang of forgotten ambition. Younger colleagues, their faces always bathed in the glow of new screens, spoke in acronyms I was never quite privy to. My suggestions in meetings were met with polite nods, then swiftly ignored. The weight of my old, familiar briefcases, once a badge of honor, now felt like a burden, heavy with the knowledge that my expertise was being quietly sidelined. I saw the signs: crucial projects assigned to others, the new software training I was accidentally left off the list for, the way the new CEO, Mr. Thompson, a man whose ambition was as sharp as his tailored suits, would look right through me, his gaze always fixed on the next big deal, the next young prodigy. He barely knew my name, let alone my contributions. Then came the email, not a conversation, of course, a corporate memo, organizational restructuring. The words felt hollow, yet they pulsed with a chilling finality. My heart pounded, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. I knew what this meant. Scrolling down, my finger trembling, I found it. Lucia Santos will be transitioning into a new advisory role, overseeing documentation archiving. Documentation archiving? After 32 years managing multi-million-dollar portfolios, after crafting financial models that saved the company millions, I was being relegated to organizing old files? The irony was a bitter taste. It wasn't a firing, it was worse. It was a demotion disguised as an advisory role, a way to shunt me aside gracefully, to make me disappear without a ripple. The next line confirmed the ultimate indignity. Her previous responsibilities will be absorbed by Mark Jenkins, our new senior financial strategist. Mark, a man half my age, barely 5 years with the company, whose innovative ideas often echoed the frameworks I had painstakingly built decades ago. He was the one they were grooming, and I was the one they were burying. I stared at the screen, words blurring, vision stinging. The polished chrome of my monitor reflected my face, a mask of quiet shock, a flush of shame and indignation. The hum of the air conditioner seemed to mock me, a soundtrack to the slow, agonizing fade of my relevance. I felt the tears welling, hot and sharp, but I swallowed them back. I would not cry here, not in this sterile, soulless place that had just stripped me of my dignity. I gathered my few personal items. Each felt heavy, weighted with memories of a career quietly, mercilessly dismantled. As I walked past Mark's open office, his laughter echoed down the hall, mingling with Mr. Thompson's booming voice. They were charting the future, a future where I had no place. Reaching the elevator, the door slid open. As I stepped inside, the chill of the air conditioning seemed to seep into my bones, a cold reminder of the emotional ice age I had just entered. I pressed the button for the ground floor, my reflection staring back at me from the polished steel, a woman of 54, feeling utterly, completely invisible. Invisible. The word resonated in the hollow space of the elevator, a cruel echo. But this feeling wasn't born today. It had been a slow, insidious creep, a gradual fading over decades. My reflection in the polished steel doors wasn't just a woman feeling invisible. It was a woman who had, perhaps, chosen invisibility without even realizing it. I remember a different reflection, one from 25 years ago. I was younger, yes, but already the lines of worry etched around my eyes. My son, Daniel, was barely a toddler, his laughter the only melody I craved. His tiny hand, so warm, so trusting, clasped in mine as we navigated the city streets. My world, once expansive, had shrunk to the four walls of our small apartment, and the daycare and the office where I poured every ounce of my energy. The smell of his baby shampoo, a sweet, comforting cloud, still lingers in my memory, occasionally catching me off guard even now when I least expected. I worked tirelessly, 2 jobs, sometimes 3, to keep a roof over our heads, to afford those new shoes he needed for school, to buy the textbooks that promised him a brighter future. There were no weekends for me, only shifts. No nights out, only late nights hunched over spreadsheets. The only sound, the hum of the old refrigerator, and the soft, steady breathing of Daniel in the next room. My back often ached, a dull, persistent throb, but the thought of his smile, his achievements, always pushed me forward. His dreams became my own. I remember the scent of cold coffee in a thermos as I rushed out the door before dawn, the quiet rustle of old papers I'd proofread into the early hours. My identity wasn't just Lucia anymore. I was Daniel's mom. I was the provider. I was the rock. I was the one who would always find a way. My hair, once styled with care, was often pulled back into a simple ponytail. My clothes were practical, durable. There was no time, no money, no energy left for myself, and I didn't mind. I believed, truly believed, that this was my purpose. My value was intertwined with his well-being, his success. As he grew, so did the demands. School projects, parent-teacher conferences, college applications. I learned to juggle, to stretch, to sacrifice. I forfeited promotions because I couldn't put in the extra hours away from home. I turned down opportunities that would have taken me out of the city, away from him. The cost was my own ambition, my own dreams. But it felt right. It felt like love. It felt like what a good mother did. I was proud to be the one who enabled him to soar. And then one day he flew. College, then his own career, his own life. My purpose, which had been so clearly defined, suddenly became blurry. The house, once filled with the controlled chaos of a growing boy, became quiet. Too quiet. I found myself still rushing home, still thinking of dinner plans for 2, only to find an empty chair. The old worn-out armchair in the living room where I'd read him bedtime stories now just sat there, waiting for a presence that wouldn't come. The feeling of the soft, faded fabric under my fingertips would often trigger a wave of bittersweet nostalgia. My work, which had always been a means to an end, now filled the void. I leaned into it, seeking the validation, the structure, the purpose it once represented. I doubled down, determined to prove that even without a child to raise, I still had value, still had a contribution to make. But the world outside Daniel's upbringing had changed, and I, Lucia, was still operating under the old rules, the old sacrifices, the old definition of worth. My silent dedication had made me not just a mother, but a woman slowly fading into the background. And so my days unfolded, a tapestry woven with threads of solitude and an unwavering availability. Each morning I rose with the sun, the aroma of fresh brewed coffee a lonely comfort in the quiet kitchen. The house, my sanctuary, was always immaculate, every cushion fluffed, every surface gleaming. I'd spend hours polishing the antique mahogany table, not just cleaning, but caressing the wood, a ritual that spoke of a life meticulously maintained, even if it often felt sparsely lived. The smell of lemon polish and beeswax would linger, a clean, almost hopeful scent, in rooms that awaited footsteps which rarely came. My culinary skills, once a source of family joy, now became an expression of unspoken yearning. I'd bake bread, its yeasty perfume filling every corner, or simmer a slow-cooked ragu for hours, envisioning a bustling table, my son Daniel and his lovely wife Sarah laughing, their baby Leo gurgling in his high chair. But often it was just me, a single plate on the vast table, the silence punctuated only by the gentle tick of the grandfather clock. I'd pack up half the meal, a generous portion, carefully labeling it for them. For Daniel and Sarah, I'd write, my handwriting neat and precise. It was a gesture of love, yes, but also a quiet offering, a silent plea to be remembered, to be considered indispensable. My phone, always within arm's reach, became a vessel of both hope and dread. Each notification sent a little flutter through me. Was it them? Would they need me to watch Leo? To bring over a fresh batch of cookies? To help with the baby shower plans, which were now in full swing for Sarah's friend? I was always ready, always on call. A quiet desperation settled over me when the days passed without a ring, when weeks would go by, punctuated only by my own calls, often answered with hurried politeness or a promise to call back soon. I longed to be a part of their new life, not just an auxiliary service. I wanted to hear about their triumphs and their daily woes, to offer advice they genuinely sought, not just a convenient babysitter or a personal chef. I remember helping Sarah choose paint samples for the nursery, my heart swelling with pride of being included. I'd spent countless hours at fabric stores, my fingers tracing the soft textures of organic cotton, imagining Leo's tiny hands reaching for them. It was during these moments, these fleeting glimpses into their world, that I felt truly alive, truly valued. Yet those moments were becoming fewer and farther between. I'd sometimes catch glimpses of their vibrant, busy lives on social media, family dinners with Sarah's parents, weekend trips with friends, all without me. My heart would ache, a dull, familiar throb. I understood, of course. They were young, building their own family, their own traditions. But where did I fit into this brave new world they were crafting? Was my place only on the periphery, a reliable fixture to be called upon when convenient? The bitter scent of forgotten tea would often fill my quiet afternoons as I sat by the window, watching the world move on, feeling like a cherished yet ultimately unused piece of heirloom furniture. I was a constant presence, yes, but increasingly an invisible one, my efforts and sacrifices becoming part of the landscape, unacknowledged, uncelebrated. I tried to push away the resentment, to focus on the love, but the feeling of being taken for granted, of being just there, started to grow, a tiny crack in the foundation of my unwavering devotion. But it wasn't just the baby, sweet as he was, that chipped away at my resolve. It was Sarah, my daughter-in-law, whose presence seemed to usher in a new era, one that politely but firmly had no room for the old guard. I understood modernity, truly. I tried to embrace it, to be supportive, to not be that interfering mother-in-law. But sometimes it felt less like embracing new ideas and more like a deliberate erasure of the tried and true, an elegant dismissal of my entire lived experience, neatly wrapped in a contemporary bow. I'd offer a gentle suggestion about airing out the house in the morning, explaining how it kept the air fresh, or the best way to steep chamomile for a truly soothing tea, a trick I'd learned from my own grandmother. Sarah would nod, a polite, almost imperceptible dip of her head, her gaze drifting past me, and then proceed to do exactly the opposite. It wasn't outright defiance, not a sharp word or an argument. It was far more insidious, a silent, pervasive invalidation. It was the weight of the silence that followed, a heavy velvet cloak settling over my words, rendering them null and void before they even truly landed. I'd watch her, stirring her instant coffee, not the rich, complex blend I'd carefully ground that morning, filling the kitchen with its comforting aroma, but a stark, almost metallic smell from a packet. The quiet clink of her spoon against the ceramic mug was the only sound, a stark contrast to the lively chatter I imagined filling the homes of other grandmothers, respected for their knowledge. My own untouched mug, its contents growing cold, seemed to echo the growing chill within me. The lingering scent of her quick brew coffee replaced the fragrant promise of mine, a subtle olfactory metaphor for my diminishing presence. It wasn't just about the mundane details of household management. It crept into everything. Advice on soothing the baby, on what kind of fabric might be gentler for his sensitive skin, on the rhythm of his naps. Each offering met with a polite but firm, "Oh, we're trying a different approach," or "my app says." The unspoken message was clear. My experience, my maternal instinct, my years of navigating parenthood were quaint relics, charming perhaps, but utterly irrelevant in their modern, optimized world. I felt like a ghost in their home, a frequent yet utterly inconsequential visitor. My hands, once so busy and purposeful, managing a bustling home, typing out meticulous reports, kneading dough for Sunday bread, now sometimes just hung by my sides, restless, unsure of where to contribute without feeling like an imposition. Was my advice truly outdated? Had all those years of running a household, raising children, nurturing a family, amounted to nothing but quaint, irrelevant folklore? The thought was a bitter swallow, thick in my throat, a dry, papery taste of growing self-doubt. Each ignored suggestion, each polite but firm redirection away from my old ways felt like a tiny, deliberate cut. Not deep enough to bleed visibly, but enough to sting, to remind me of my supposed obsolescence. It wasn't just about the tidiness of a room or the proper temperature for tea, or even the baby's comfort. It was about validation. It was about being seen, being heard, being valued for the wisdom I carried, not just for the gifts I brought or the occasional babysitting I provided. It was about the slow, agonizing realization that my presence, once a source of comfort and guidance, had become, at best, tolerated. At worst, it was an inconvenience. And the truth of that, like the ever-present hum of their smart home devices, was a constant, low-level thrum of despair. Returning to my own home after those visits, the silence was deafening. It wasn't just the absence of a baby's cry or the murmur of conversation. It was the echo of my unneeded presence. I'd try. Oh, how I'd try. "Let me brew you some chamomile tea, dear," I'd suggest to Sarah, my daughter-in-law, her new mother glow already fading under the weight of sleepless nights. "It's excellent for unwinding." She'd smile, a weary, polite curve of her lips. "Oh, that's so sweet of you, Lucia, but I just had some. My friend brought me a special blend earlier." I'd see the baby's nursery, a whirlwind of tiny clothes and half-used wipes. My instinct, honed over decades of managing a busy household and a demanding career, was to bring order, to fold the blankets, to arrange the tiny bottles, to create a peaceful sanctuary for my grandchild. "Let me just straighten up the nursery a little," I'd offer, already reaching for a discarded onesie. "It'll be much calmer for the baby." Sarah would gently interject, "No, honestly, it's fine, Lucia. We have our system, and the cleaner comes on Thursday." A system. My lifetime of experience, reduced to an unnecessary interference. My efforts seen as a clumsy intrusion rather than a loving contribution. The worst was when my help was accepted, only to be subtly, painstakingly undone moments later. I'd tidy the changing station, ensuring everything was within easy reach. An hour later, I'd find it rearranged, a different brand of wipes front and center, my carefully organized stack of diapers shifted. It was a silent, infuriating repudiation. Each gesture of dismissal, each polite refusal, chipped away at my self-worth. I was a guest, an inconvenient one, tolerated out of obligation, not cherished as family. The invisible woman, that was me. A mother, a grandmother, a woman who had given so much, now barely registered in the periphery of their lives. My own home, once a bustling hub, felt like a mausoleum. The quiet was oppressive. The elegant furniture, the carefully chosen artwork, even the scent of my favorite lavender potpourri, all seemed to mock my solitude. I would walk from room to room, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors, each sound amplifying the emptiness. And there it was, an omnipresent presence in the stillness, the hum of the air conditioning, a steady, mechanical drone that filled the void but did nothing to warm the chill in my heart. It became the soundtrack to my growing isolation, a constant reminder of how peripheral I had become. It buzzed, a low, metallic sigh, a companion to my silent tears. My home, a testament to a life lived, now felt like a stage from which the audience had departed, leaving only a lingering sense of unfulfillment and the cold, relentless whir of machinery. The mug on my desk, forgotten hours ago, still held the ghost of what should have been a warm start to my day. I picked it up, the ceramic cold against my fingers, and the faint, bitter smell of stale coffee filled my nostrils, a stark reminder of all the neglected moments. I'd made it with intention, hoping for a quiet moment, but then the urge to connect, to hear a familiar voice had taken over. I tried calling my son again. 3 rings, straight to voicemail. "Hey, Mom, busy right now. I'll call you back." The automated voice was warmer than his pre-recorded message, a chilling thought. He rarely called back. My hand, still holding the cold mug, trembled slightly as I put the phone down. It wasn't anger, not really. More like a profound ache, a weariness that settled deep in my chest. Just yesterday, I'd driven across town, heart full, to see my grandson. A small, perfect smile. A quick hug. Then his eyes, full of the boundless energy of youth, drifting back to a screen. My daughter-in-law, ever polite, but distracted, busy. Her words rushed. It was a visit measured in minutes, not memories. Now, back in my meticulously kept home, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was sepulchral. Each tick of the grandfather clock, each settling creak of the old house, amplified the void. It felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for a vibrancy that no longer came from me. My own footsteps echoed unnaturally on the polished hardwood floors.
The air, usually filled with the gentle hum of daily life, a television in the background, a kettle whistling, the distant murmur of conversation, was now a vast, empty canvas of soundlessness. I sank into my favorite armchair, the one my late husband always said was my throne. I used to feel its plush embrace as a comforting hug, a sanctuary after a long day. Now it felt too big, too empty. I ran my hand over the worn velvet, a ghost of his touch, a phantom limb of shared laughter and quiet evenings. The space beside me, once filled by a warm presence, was a chilling testament to a new, unwelcome chapter. It wasn't just the physical space. It was an emptiness that resonated deep within my bones, a hollow ache where purpose and belonging used to reside. A heavy blanket of invisibility seemed to have settled over me, muffling my voice, my presence, my very being. I wasn't just alone. I felt unseen, like a cherished book left on a shelf, slowly gathering dust, waiting to be rediscovered, but knowing, deep down, that its story might never be read again. The quiet hum of the refrigerator became an almost oppressive drone, filling the silence that my family seemed so content to leave me in. Every carefully chosen piece of art, every framed photograph, felt like a silent accuser, reflecting back a life that was once vibrant, now merely existing. I walked through the silent house, the polished wooden floors echoing my footsteps with a hollow sound that seemed to mock my solitude. The scent of stale air, a faint metallic tang from the unused kitchen, seemed to cling to everything, a suffocating blanket of quiet. My reflection in the darkened window pane stared back at me, a woman I barely recognized. The lines around my eyes, once symbols of laughter and wisdom, now felt like etchings of weariness. Was I too old? The question, an insidious serpent, began to coil around my thoughts, squeezing tighter with each passing minute. Was this it? Had I reached an age where my experience became a liability, my perspective deemed outdated? My mind replayed snippets of conversations, veiled comments at work, dismissive glances from younger colleagues. They weren't overtly cruel, but the subtle jabs, the quick eye rolls when I suggested a more traditional approach, had chipped away at me, piece by painful piece. The pain of rejection, so sharp and unexpected from a career I'd nurtured for decades, was now a dull, constant ache. It wasn't just the job. It was my very identity that felt corroded. Who was Lucia without her spreadsheets, her strategic plans, her ability to untangle complex problems with a calm, decisive hand? I used to define myself by my contributions, by the intricate dance of numbers and ideas that brought tangible results. Now I felt like a dancer whose music had stopped, left frozen mid-movement, utterly lost. My confidence, once a sturdy oak, had been reduced to a fragile sapling, swaying precariously in the wind of self-doubt. Every memory of a past achievement now carried a whisper. But that was then. That was a different time. The world seemed to have spun on, leaving me behind, a static figure in a rapidly changing landscape. I picked up a book, its spine uncreased, and then put it down again. The words blurred. My focus was fractured by the incessant internal monologue. I found myself wandering from room to room, touching objects, as if searching for a forgotten piece of myself within their familiar textures. The cool ceramic of a coffee mug, the rough weave of a throw blanket, the smooth glass of a picture frame holding a smiling younger me. Each touch was a faint tremor against a growing sense of emptiness. The thought that I might be a burden began to settle in my gut, a heavy, unwelcome guest. My children, my husband, they had their lives, their careers, their own forward momentum.
Was I just a relic of their past, a sentimental object they kept out of duty, not genuine need? A relic. The word resonated with a chilling accuracy. A beautiful, perhaps, but ultimately purposeless antique. Something admired for its history, but no longer functional, no longer relevant. The silence of the house amplified these thoughts, each one a hammer blow against the dwindling embers of my self-worth. I stood by the kitchen window, watching a solitary bird land on the feeder, then fly away. Its freedom, its clear sense of purpose, felt like a stark contrast to my own spiraling uncertainty. The warmth of the sun touched my skin, but it brought no comfort, only highlighted the chill that had settled deep within my bones. My worth, once self-evident, now felt like an unsolved equation, and I was too tired to even attempt to find the answer. I walked away from Daniel's front door, the silence of his goodbye echoing louder than any slammed door. The cool night air offered no solace, only a sharper sting against my cheeks. Each step toward my car felt heavy, as if I were wading through unseen molasses. The familiar shape of my sedan, parked under a lonely streetlight, seemed to sag with its own unspoken burden. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking slightly, the metallic jingle a stark contrast to the quiet ache in my chest. Sliding into the driver's seat, the cool vinyl offered a temporary reprieve from the cold outside, but the emptiness inside me remained. I closed the door, the soft thud sealing me into my own private capsule of grief. The faint scent of forgotten coffee and stale air freshener hung in the air, a familiar comfort that somehow intensified my loneliness. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, then pushed the ignition. The engine rumbled to life, a low, steady hum that became the soundtrack to my unraveling. And then they came. Not a violent sob, not a dramatic wail, but a quiet, relentless flow. Tears, hot and heavy, traced paths down my temples, pooling in the hollows of my ears, tickling my jawline. I didn't try to stop them. There was no one to impress, no facade to maintain, no expectation to meet. Just me, the steady hum of the engine, and the overwhelming wave of sorrow that finally broke over me. Through the watery haze, I glanced into the rearview mirror. Daniel's house, lights warm and inviting from the outside, now looked like a fortress where I was no longer welcome, where my attempts to connect, to offer help, to simply be a mother, were met with polite but firm resistance. It was supposed to be a place of warmth, a refuge for family. Instead, it had become a stage for my invisibility. I saw myself reflected in the glass, a woman whose eyes held the weight of too many unspoken words, too many unreturned gestures. The weight of the steering wheel in my hands was the weight of my sadness, of my longing, of the profound sense of being utterly unneeded. It was the weight of years spent nurturing, loving, sacrificing, only to find myself pushed to the periphery, both professionally and personally. At work, I was obsolete. At home, I was a ghost, a whisper in a room full of shouts. The quiet sobs hitched in my throat, each one a tiny earthquake shaking my resolve. Was this what 50 felt like? An emptying out? A slow fade from the vibrant tapestry of life? The streetlights outside blurred into long streaks of color as my vision swam. I took a shaky breath, trying to steady myself, but the air felt thin, unyielding. My chest ached, not with physical pain, but with the crushing burden of being overlooked, undervalued, unloved in the ways I desperately needed. This wasn't just about my job, or just about Daniel. It was about everything. It was about the sum of all the tiny rejections, the subtle dismissals that had accumulated over the past few years, finally collapsing in on me right here, in the quiet solitude of my car.
I closed my eyes, letting the tears flow freely, a desperate, silent plea for someone, anyone, to truly see me. Weeks blurred into a quiet, unsettling rhythm after that day in the car. The raw ache in my chest slowly began to scab over, but the scar remained, a constant reminder of my unceremonious dismissal. I was navigating my own sudden, unexpected landscape of solitude, of figuring out what came next, when the fragmented echoes of another kind of chaos began to filter into my days. My son Daniel started calling more often, but his calls were different now, shorter, sharper. They weren't updates on his life, but rather desperate dispatches from a front line I knew all too well. The first time he just sighed, "Mom, another sleepless night. Leo's just inconsolable. And Sarah, she's strung so tight I feel like she might snap." The next call, a week later, was even more afraid. "The house is a disaster, Mom. We haven't had a proper meal in days. Leo just cries, and Sarah's just gone. She's there, but she's not there." I listened, my hand unconsciously smoothing the cool surface of the kitchen counter. Each disjointed sentence from Daniel painted a vivid, agonizing picture in my mind. The endless, shrill cries of a newborn that felt like drills boring into your very soul. The suffocating exhaustion that made the simplest task, like making a sandwich, feel like scaling Everest. The ghost of cold coffee I knew Sarah must be drinking, forgotten on various surfaces, a testament to interrupted moments. I didn't need him to elaborate. I knew. I knew the particular brand of silent despair that settled over a new mother when she felt utterly alone, utterly incapable. I remembered it myself decades ago, the days when I would have given anything for someone to simply take the baby for an hour, to make a cup of hot tea that I could actually finish while it was still warm. I remembered offering that very relief, that seasoned insight, just weeks ago, and I remembered how it had been politely, firmly dismissed. A strange, hollow ache settled beside the ache of my own recent rejection. I imagined Sarah now, perhaps rocking Leo in a dimly lit nursery, the air thick with unacknowledged tears, the smell of stale milk and desperate hope clinging to everything. I could almost hear the low hum of the baby monitor, a constant low-level drone of anxiety. Daniel's voice, usually so steady, now carried a distinct edge of panic. "She just snapped at me again, Mom. Said I don't understand. Said I never help." He sighed, a sound so heavy it seemed to carry the weight of their entire crumbling world. I don't know what to do anymore." And in that moment, as the silence stretched across the phone line, broken only by the faint static that whispered of distance, I found myself holding back. The words to help, to guide, to offer a temporary reprieve formed on my tongue. "Let me come over, even for a day. I can cook, I can hold Leo while Sarah sleeps." But they stayed there, unspoken. The sting of being told I was interfering or old-fashioned was still too fresh, too raw. A strange, hollow ache settled beside the ache of my own recent rejection. I imagined Sarah now, perhaps rocking Leo in a dimly lit nursery, the air thick with unacknowledged tears, the smell of stale milk and desperate hope clinging to everything. I could almost hear the low hum of the baby monitor, a constant low-level drone of anxiety. Daniel's voice, usually so steady, now carried a distinct edge of panic. "She just snapped at me again, Mom. Said I don't understand. Said I never help." He sighed, a sound so heavy it seemed to carry the weight of their entire crumbling world. I don't know what to do anymore." And in that moment, as the silence stretched across the phone line, broken only by the faint static that whispered of distance, I found myself holding back. The words to help, to guide, to offer a temporary reprieve formed on my tongue. "Let me come over, even for a day. I can cook, I can hold Leo while Sarah sleeps." But they stayed there, unspoken. The sting of being told I was interfering or old-fashioned was still too fresh, too raw. A strange, hollow ache settled beside the ache of my own recent rejection. I imagined Sarah now, perhaps rocking Leo in a dimly lit nursery, the air thick with unacknowledged tears, the smell of stale milk and desperate hope clinging to everything. I could almost hear the low hum of the baby monitor, a constant low-level drone of anxiety. Daniel's voice, usually so steady, now carried a distinct edge of panic. "She just snapped at me again, Mom. Said I don't understand. Said I never help." He sighed, a sound so heavy it seemed to carry the weight of their entire crumbling world. I don't know what to do anymore." And in that moment, as the silence stretched across the phone line, broken only by the faint static that whispered of distance, I found myself holding back. The words to help, to guide, to offer a temporary reprieve formed on my tongue. "Let me come over, even for a day. I can cook, I can hold Leo while Sarah sleeps." But they stayed there, unspoken. The sting of being told I was interfering or old-fashioned was still too fresh, too raw. A strange hollow ache isn't for vindication, not truly. It was a profound, bittersweet understanding. I saw the chaos unfurling, vivid and undeniable, precisely because the wisdom I carried, the calm and experienced hand I offered, had been so casually set aside. It felt like watching a slow-motion accident, knowing exactly how to prevent it, but having my hands tied by a politeness that had, ironically, become a barrier. So I just listened. I offered platitudes, vague reassurances that things would get better. And then I hung up, the quiet of my own home suddenly amplified, a stark contrast to the frantic, fragmented reality my son had just laid bare.
The empty chair at my kitchen table, the unused baby swing in the attic, they whispered of a different path, a path where my presence might have smoothed the rough edges of new parenthood, where my experience might have been a comfort instead of a perceived intrusion. I was an invisible monitor, witnessing the storm from afar, a storm I could have helped weather if only someone had remembered to value the lighthouse. The insistent ring of my phone sliced through the unnatural quiet of my apartment, a sharp contrast to the gentle, almost mournful hum of the refrigerator. I'd been sitting, just sitting, watching the dust motes dance in the sliver of late afternoon sun, a cup of now cold chamomile tea clutched in my hand. The bitter scent of the forgotten brew hung faintly in the air, mirroring the taste of my own lingering sorrow. The screen flashed. Daniel, my son. A strange premonition, a cold dread, tightened its grip on my chest. He rarely called during these hours unless it was urgent. With a shaky hand, I answered, the plastic of the phone feeling unusually slick against my palm. "Mom," he croaked, the single word a raw, strained whisper, utterly devoid of his usual confident cadence. It was the sound of a man at the end of his tether, stripped bare of all pretense. "Mom, please, you have to come." My breath hitched. "Daniel, what is it? What's wrong? Is everything all right?" My mind raced through 1,000 worst-case scenarios, a mother's inherent panic overriding everything else. It's the baby, Mom," he stammered, his voice cracking, thick with exhaustion and desperation. I could hear a faint, high-pitched wail in the background, a sound that pierced through me more acutely than any boardroom insult ever could. "He hasn't stopped crying. For hours, Mom. For what feels like an eternity. She's just breaking down. She's in a crisis, Mom. She's exhausted, she's blaming herself, she doesn't know what to do anymore. We haven't slept, we don't know what to do. We're so tired, so utterly drained. We've tried everything." The corporate slights, the cold dismissal, the gnawing feeling of being invisible, it all evaporated in an instant. My own recent wounds, still raw and tender, suddenly felt selfish, insignificant. This was not a power play. This was a plea from the heart, a desperate cry from my flesh and blood. My heart ached, a fierce, protective pain, for him, for Sarah, and for my tiny grandson whose relentless cries now echoed not just through the phone, but through the very chambers of my soul. That familiar maternal instinct, dormant for a time under layers of professional disappointment, surged through me with an undeniable, visceral force. This wasn't about spreadsheets or quarterly reports. This was about raw human need. My son, the man I'd nurtured, guided, and loved unconditionally, was lost. His young family was teetering on the edge, and they needed me. "Please, Mom," he whispered again, his voice cracking with renewed desperation, a quiet sob escaping him. Just come. We need you. We really need you."
There was no hesitation, no internal debate. The world had shrunk to this moment, this urgent call.
My own pain, my feelings of obsolescence, were suddenly dwarfed by the immediate, overwhelming suffering of my family. It was a stark reminder that while my professional value might have been questioned, my personal value, my intrinsic worth as a mother and grandmother, remained unassailable. It was a power that transcended titles and paychecks. "I'm on my way, Daniel," I said, my voice firm, clear, a newfound strength replacing the weariness that had settled in my bones. I was already moving, grabbing my car keys from the hook by the door, my handbag slung over my shoulder, almost mechanically. "I'll be there as fast as I can. Just breathe, darling. I'm coming." The drive felt both interminable and acutely urgent, the dying light of the day casting long, skeletal shadows across the suburban streets. The evening traffic, usually a source of mild frustration, now felt like a deliberate personal blockade, each red light a test of my rapidly dwindling patience. I pressed my foot down on the accelerator, perhaps a little too hard, the hum of the engine a desperate counterpoint to the anxious thrumming in my chest. My mind raced, picturing their small apartment, the toys scattered on the floor like discarded hopes, the dimmed lights unable to fully mask the heavy air of exhaustion and despair that must cling to every surface. I imagined the smell of stale formula, perhaps, or the faint sweet scent of a freshly changed diaper, now utterly overshadowed by the sour tang of stress, of unfulfilled needs, of tears. A lifetime of experience, tucked away in the deepest corners of my memory, began to resurface. Every trick, every lullaby, every soothing technique I'd used when Daniel was a baby, and then his sister, seemed to spring forward, ready to be deployed. This was a different kind of challenge than a hostile takeover, a different kind of crisis management, but no less critical. Perhaps, I thought, as I navigated a tricky turn, this was the universe's way of reminding me where my true strength lay, that my worth wasn't defined by the cold, calculating metrics of a corporation, but by the warmth, the chaos, and the unconditional love of my family. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a distinct sense of purpose, a reason to move forward beyond my own wounded pride. I was needed, and that realization was a powerful antidote to invisibility. I didn't rush to their house, not this time. For years, my life had been dictated by their needs, their emergencies, their whims. I had been the one always picking up the pieces, always the first to arrive, always the one to clean up the mess. But something had shifted inside me. My patience, once a bottomless well of self-sacrifice, had become a finely honed instrument of self-worth. This wasn't about revenge, it was about reclaiming my space, my time, my dignity. I sat in my living room, the late afternoon sun casting long, gentle shadows across the polished floorboards. The scent of the lavender sachet I kept by the window mingled with the fainter, familiar aroma of my herbal tea cooling on the side table. I didn't need to check my watch. I knew they would come. They always did, eventually, when the gravity of their own decisions pulled them back to earth. The silence of my home, once a source of quiet loneliness, now felt like a sanctuary, a testament to my newfound peace. The doorbell rang then, a sharp, insistent chime that cut through the stillness. I took a slow, deliberate breath, the kind I'd learned from my meditation app, steadying myself, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted to savor the moment of deliberate calm. There was no need to hurry. They could wait. I rose, moving with a grace I hadn't felt in years, my steps light, unburdened by the weight of expectation. When I opened the door, the woman standing on my porch was a ghost of the vibrant, sometimes haughty figure I knew as my daughter-in-law, Sarah. Her usually perfectly coiffed blonde hair hung limp and disheveled around a face that was strikingly pale, almost translucent. Deep, bruised-looking circles underscored her eyes, which, just weeks ago, had held an undeniable flicker of arrogance whenever they met mine. Now, there was no trace of that condescension, only a stark, raw vulnerability that made her look years older than her actual age.
I didn't need to hear her speak to understand her state. It was in the slump of her shoulders, the tremor in her hands clutching her handbag, the way her gaze darted, unable to meet mine directly for more than a second. In her presence, I could almost taste it, an almost palpable smell of despair, thick and acrid, clinging to her like a shroud. It was the scent of a life unraveling, of confidence shattered, of consequences finally catching up. "Lucia," she began, her voice hoarse, barely a whisper. I am so sorry for everything. We made a mistake, a terrible mistake. Please, you have to help us. We don't know what to do." Her words tumbled out, a desperate, unpolished plea that was so unlike the composed, self-assured Sarah I knew. I looked at her, truly looked at her, seeing past the superficial layer of regret to the very real pain beneath. My heart, once hardened by their indifference, felt a pang, not of pity, but of a quiet understanding. I remembered my own moments of despair, of feeling lost and without options. But unlike her, I had faced mine alone. "Come in, Sarah," I said, my voice even, unhurried, devoid of any judgment or triumph. I stepped aside, opening the door wider, inviting her into the sanctuary of my home. She hesitated for a moment, as if unsure if she deserved to cross the threshold, then slowly, reluctantly stepped inside. The afternoon sun illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air, oblivious to the drama unfolding, and as she passed me, I caught the faintest hint of that sour scent of desperation once more. The journey to help was about to begin, but it would be on my terms. I found myself at the kitchen table, across from Sarah. The air was thick, heavy with unspoken expectations, and the faint, lingering scent of burnt toast from her earlier frantic attempts at breakfast. My heart, once felt like a trapped bird whenever I entered this house, was now beating with a steady, resolute rhythm. It wasn't the frantic pulse of anger, nor the dull throb of sorrow. It was the calm, measured beat of a woman who had finally found her voice. Sarah shifted in her seat, her gaze flickering, unable to meet mine directly for more than a fleeting second. She probably expected tears, an appeal, perhaps even a lecture. But I had moved beyond that. The time for pleading was long past. I folded my hands on the cool laminate of the table, feeling the smooth, slightly sticky surface beneath my fingertips. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Every word I was about to utter had been distilled through months of pain, purified by the fire of self-discovery.
"Sarah," I began, my voice clear, surprisingly level. "We need to talk. Not about what I can do for you now, but about what has happened." Her eyes finally locked with mine, a flicker of defensiveness, then confusion. She was used to my presence being pliable, my opinions easily dismissed. "Do you remember," I continued, each word a stone laid firmly on the path, "when I suggested a different marketing strategy for your online store, back when you were struggling with inventory turnover? I had 20 years of experience in retail logistics, Sarah. I offered to help you analyze your suppliers, optimize your pricing models. You said, 'Mom, I appreciate it, but things are different now. Your methods are a little antiquated.'" I paused, letting the memory hang between us, thick and uncomfortable. The silence was punctuated only by the distant hum of the refrigerator. "And when your website crashed and I spent an entire weekend researching affordable, reliable hosting services for you, even outlining a contingency plan, you brushed it off, saying you'd handle it, only to call in a panic 3 days later when your sales plummeted. My help, my time, my expertise, all invisible until the crisis hit." Her face began to color, a slow flush rising from her neck. She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand, not in anger, but in a gesture of quiet authority that surprised even me. "Or the time I offered to help with Daniel's homework when you were overwhelmed? I loved spending time with them, helping them with their projects. You politely declined, saying you wanted to foster their independence, when in reality you just wanted me out of the way, to manage alone, only to complain later about how much you had on your plate.
My voice remained steady, a quiet force. There were no printed documents, no official reports, but the weight of my words was like a dossier, each memory a carefully recorded incident, each ignored piece of advice a stark exhibit. I wasn't accusing, I was stating facts, undeniable truths that had shaped our relationship. For years, Sarah, I went on, my gaze unwavering, I have offered my support, my wisdom, my love, and for years my presence has been minimized, my advice disregarded, my contributions treated as quaint suggestions, or worse, as intrusions. I became furniture in this house, someone to be tolerated, called upon only when absolutely necessary, and then quickly put back in her place. The truth hung in the air, a bitter perfume. Sarah's eyes, now wide and startled, finally reflected a glimmer of understanding, or perhaps just shock at my composure. I am not furniture, Sarah, I said, my voice dropping slightly, imbued with an unwavering conviction. My experience, my knowledge, my heart, they are not commodities to be picked up and discarded at your convenience. They are part of who I am, and they deserve respect. I leaned forward slightly, my eyes holding hers in a grip she couldn't break. This wasn't about resentment, it was about clarity. I am here now because you called, but the dynamic, the way you have treated me, the way I have allowed myself to be treated, that ends now. I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me, a quiet triumph that wasn't about victory over her, but about reclaiming myself. The sour scent of desperation I'd perceived earlier, it was no longer mine. It was hers, and she was just beginning to realize it. This confrontation wasn't about burning bridges. It was about building solid ground beneath my own feet. The journey to help would indeed be on my terms, and those terms began with acknowledging my worth unequivocally.
The air in the living room, usually thick with unspoken resentments and my own swallowed words, felt different now. Lighter, somehow, even as a fresh tension began to coil. My daughter-in-law, Sarah, sat across from me, her phone still clutched in her hand, her face a mask of worry. She'd come here desperate, but that desperation, I now realized, was a double-edged sword. It gave me leverage, yes, but it also offered her a chance to see me, truly see me, for the first time in years. I took a deep breath, the scent of the herbal tea I'd made for her, now cool and untouched, faintly in the air. My gaze met hers, not with accusation, but with a newfound clarity that must have unnerved her. "It's over, my dear," I began, my voice steady, no longer wavering with the anxiety that used to plague me in her presence. "The era where my wisdom was disposable and my love ignored is finished." I paused, letting the words settle, watching the subtle shift in her expression from urgency to a dawning comprehension of something far more significant. My time, my energy, my experience, none of it is a given anymore. My worth is not negotiable. The silence that followed was profound, punctuated only by the distant hum of traffic outside and the rapid beat of my own heart, a drum roll for the new chapter. Sarah's eyes widened, a flicker of shock, then perhaps indignation, crossing her features before settling into a grudging understanding. She had expected a plea, a capitulation, perhaps even a grateful acceptance of her need. What she got instead was an ultimatum cloaked in quiet dignity. "If you want my help," I continued, leaning forward slightly, "you must recognize my value, not merely need it." I articulated my terms, each word chosen with the precision of a seasoned negotiator, something I hadn't realized I was until this very moment. First, there must be respect, for my opinions, for my boundaries, for the life I choose to live independently of yours. Second, I need my space, not just physical space in my home, but emotional space to be myself without constant judgment or unsolicited advice. I watched her carefully. Her jaw was tight, her shoulders stiff. Humiliation was definitely there, etched around her mouth. She was a proud woman, and this was undoubtedly a bitter pill. But the fear in her eyes, the sheer panic of her situation, outweighed her pride. And third, I concluded, my voice softening just a fraction, I want to be a grandmother, a real grandmother, one who is invited, not just called upon in a crisis, one who gets to nurture and cherish, not just clean up messes, one who is loved, not just used. I gestured towards the framed photo on the mantelpiece, a picture of my grandchildren, smiling. "This isn't just about helping you with the children now, Sarah. This is about establishing a foundation for a healthy relationship for all of us moving forward." Sarah listened, her face draining of color.
She looked as though she'd been struck, not by a physical blow, but by the weight of my quiet resolve. Her initial shock gave way to a defeated slump of her shoulders. She had arrived expecting a quick fix, an easy solution provided by the ever-available old woman. Instead, she was being asked to overhaul her entire perception, to acknowledge a person she had long treated as an extension of her own convenience. She swallowed hard, her gaze dropping to her hands, which still clutched the phone. The device, once a symbol of her busy, connected world, now seemed useless, unable to navigate this terrain. I could almost hear the gears turning in her mind, the furious calculation of her options, and slowly, agonizingly, it dawned on her. She had none. Not really. Not if she truly wanted the stability and support I could offer. A long moment passed, thick with unspoken truths. The silence stretched, a testament to the magnitude of what had just been said. Finally, she looked up, her eyes still wide, a flicker of something akin to fear mixed with reluctant acceptance. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper.
I understand, Lucia, she said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. I accept your conditions. Her words were a concession, not a genuine embrace of my terms. Not yet, but it was a start. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt a deep, quiet sense of power blooming within me. It wasn't about control over her, but about reclaiming control over my own life, my own narrative. The battle for respect had just begun, and I, at 50 plus, was finally armed for it. My words, firm but not harsh, hung in the air, a finality that Sarah seemed to finally grasp. Her shoulders slumped, a silent concession. The defiant glint in her eyes had been replaced by a weary resignation. The baby's cries, relentless and piercing, seemed to punctuate her defeat, a tiny, urgent demand for attention that Sarah, at that moment, was utterly incapable of providing. The crumpled tissues, the spilled coffee on the counter, the unopened mail, all spoke of a household teetering on the edge of collapse. She simply nodded, a slow, almost imperceptible movement, her gaze fixed on a distant point, anywhere but on me or her crying child. "Fine," she whispered, her voice raw, barely audible over the infant's wails. "Whatever you say." It wasn't an apology, not an embrace, but it was a surrender. And in that surrender, I saw not a victory for me, but a desperate plea for help from her. I didn't gloat. There was no triumph in witnessing someone's breaking point, only a profound sense of purpose. This wasn't about winning, it was about healing. I walked over to the bassinet, my movement slow and deliberate, a calmness emanating from me that seemed to cut through the frantic energy of the room. The baby, crimson-faced and screaming, thrashed its tiny limbs. I gently scooped the infant into my arms. The warmth of that fragile body against mine was a balm to my own bruised spirit. I began to hum, a soft old lullaby, the kind my grandmother used to sing. The melody was faint, a whisper against the storm. But slowly, miraculously, the baby's cries began to subside. I held him close, rocking gently, my cheek resting against his downy head, inhaling the sweet, milky scent of newborn. It was a smell I knew so intimately, a fragrance of new beginnings, of unconditional love. Sarah watched, her expression unreadable, a flicker of something almost like awe crossing her features as the wails softened to whimpers, then to soft, sleepy murmurs. Within minutes, the baby was quiet, nestled against me, eyes fluttering closed. The pure, simple act of comforting a child, a skill honed over decades, had never felt more profound. I looked up, meeting Sarah's gaze. "Let's get you comfortable, my dear," I said, my voice gentle but firm, "and then we can talk about how to make this easier for both of you." I guided her to the sofa, helped her adjust a pillow. I spoke softly, explaining the baby's feeding cues, demonstrating how to latch him properly, patiently guiding her trembling hands. The first attempt was clumsy, frustrated, but I kept my voice steady, my encouragement unwavering. "It takes practice, darling. Don't worry. You're doing wonderfully." And slowly, painstakingly, a rhythm began to emerge. The tiny suckling sounds filled the sudden quiet, a sound more beautiful than any symphony. While Sarah focused on this most intimate act, I moved through the apartment. The kitchen, once a battlefield of dirty dishes and half-eaten meals, was swiftly transformed. I cleared the counters, loaded the dishwasher, brewed a fresh pot of coffee, not the stale, cold kind, but rich, aromatic coffee that filled the air with a comforting warmth. The scattered toys, the discarded clothes, the general disarray that had overwhelmed Sarah gradually found their place. It wasn't about perfection, but about creating an environment of calm and order, a sanctuary where a new mother could breathe. The soft swish of the broom, the gentle clatter of dishes, the quiet hum of the washing machine, these were the sounds of a home being restored, stitch by stitch. By the time my son arrived home, the transformation was remarkable. The apartment, though still lived in, no longer felt like a disaster zone. The scent of coffee and clean linen had replaced the stale air. He walked in, hesitantly, perhaps expecting the usual cacophony, but was met with an almost serene tableau. Sarah, still on the sofa, a soft blanket draped over her, the baby contentedly asleep in her arms, a look of exhausted peace on her face, and me, quietly folding laundry, a gentle smile playing on my lips. He looked at me, then at Sarah and the baby, a question in his eyes, but also an overwhelming sense of relief. The tension that had etched itself into his shoulders for weeks seemed to melt away. He didn't need to ask. The silent symphony of a calm home, the contented sigh of his wife, the gentle breathing of his child, it all spoke volumes. The chaos had truly calmed. Peace, like a long-lost friend, had returned to his house, not forced, not demanded, but woven into the fabric of daily life by hands that knew its true value. I was no longer an invisible fixture. I was the quiet architect of their peace, a strength I hadn't realized they desperately needed. And as I watched my son embrace his family, a profound sense of validation settled over me. This was my value, undeniable and palpable. The shift was immediate, almost palpable in the air. My daughter-in-law, Sarah, watched with wide, relieved eyes as I gently rocked little Leo. His tiny fists were no longer balled up in frustration. His breathing was even, a soft murmur against my chest. The frantic energy that had buzzed through their apartment just hours before had dissipated, replaced by a quiet calm that spread like warm honey. My son, Daniel, moved closer, his shoulders, once tense and hunched, now relaxed. He looked from Leo to me, a dawning realization in his gaze. "Mom," he began, his voice rough with emotion. I don't know what to say." Sarah nodded, her own eyes glistening. "It's like magic, Lucia. We've tried everything." Magic, I thought, was merely the accumulated wisdom of years, the patience forged in countless sleepless nights, and the quiet confidence of knowing what truly nurtures. It was the opposite of invisibility, of being dismissed as an outdated relic. It was understanding the subtle cues, the unspoken needs, the delicate balance of a new family. "There's no magic, dear," I said softly, my gaze on Leo's peaceful face. "Just a little listening, and perhaps a different perspective." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized from his childhood when he was wrestling with a difficult truth. "Mom, I am so sorry," he finally managed, his voice barely a whisper. For everything, for not seeing, for making you feel like you weren't important, like you didn't have anything to offer. We were so caught up, so stressed. We just didn't see you." Sarah reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "He's right, Lucia. We were blind. We judged you unfairly. We thought we knew best." My heart, which had carried the quiet ache of their distance for so long, felt a gentle thaw. It wasn't about seeking their validation, not anymore. My value was intrinsic. But to hear it, to have the curtain of their neglect finally pulled back, was a balm. It was the explicit recognition of something I had already reaffirmed within myself. And the room itself had transformed. The air, heavy with unspoken tension, and the cloying sweetness of various calming remedies, now felt light, breathable. I remembered the little diffuser on the dresser, constantly emitting what was meant to be a soothing scent. Before, the smell of lavender in the baby's room felt oppressive, an almost desperate attempt to mask the underlying chaos.
Now, after I'd subtly adjusted the concentration, allowing for breaks, letting fresh air circulate, it was different. It was genuinely calming, a delicate whisper of peace rather than a shout. It mingled with the faint, sweet scent of a freshly changed baby, creating an atmosphere of true serenity. I looked at my son, truly looked at him, and saw the remorse, but also a newfound respect. The relief flooding his face was profound. He saw not just a grandmother soothing his child, but the woman, his mother, who held a depth of wisdom he had previously overlooked. It was a beautiful thing, this silent acknowledgement, this quiet understanding that transcended words. My worth wasn't a commodity to be negotiated, but an inherent quality that once seen was undeniable. And in that moment, in the gentle rhythm of Leo's breathing and the soft glow of their newfound understanding, I knew my journey had brought me to exactly where I needed to be. They had seen, and I, finally, was truly seen. Days later, the quiet hum of my new reality was a symphony I never knew I craved. The mornings, once a frantic dash, now unfolded with the unhurried grace of a blooming flower. I sat in my favorite armchair, sunlight dappling through the window, a cup of chamomile tea warming my hands. A new book lay open on my lap, its pages still crisp, promising new worlds. Just as I turned a page, the distinct ring of the landline cut through the serenity. A relic, really, but one I kept for emergencies. My heart gave a little jump. Who could it be? I walked slowly to the small table in the hall, the receiver cool beneath my fingers. Hello? A hesitant voice, my daughter-in-law, Sarah, and then I heard the faint, small voice of my son, Daniel, in the background. My breath caught. Sarah's voice was different, softer. Donna Lucia, she began, a tremor in her tone. We need you. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken apologies, with the weight of recent events. We want you back in our lives, truly. We've missed you. Leo misses you so much. My heart ached for my grandson, but a steely resolve kept me grounded. Then Daniel's voice, clearer this time, laced with a vulnerability I hadn't heard in years. Mom, he said, the single word a quiet plea. How much time do you want to spend with your grandson? What is your worth? The question, what is your worth, echoed in the silence of my home, so starkly different from the last time I'd heard a similar question, twisted into an insult in Robert's office. It was no longer a demand to justify my existence, but a genuine, albeit belated, attempt to acknowledge my value. The irony was almost palpable. For so long I had chased that validation, a mirage in the desert of my tireless dedication. Now it was being offered, laid bare, like a peace offering. I closed my eyes for a fleeting moment, a montage of my journey flashing through my mind. The long, thankless years, the sudden, brutal dismissal, the tears shed in solitude, the slow, arduous path to rediscovering myself, brick by painful brick. The quiet joy of teaching Leo, the warmth of his small hand in mine, the feeling of being truly seen by that innocent, loving gaze. That was my worth. It wasn't something to be quantified or negotiated over a phone line. When I spoke, my voice was steady, calm, imbued with a quiet power I'd cultivated through every challenge. Sarah, Daniel, I began, allowing a gentle sigh to escape, a release of old hurts. I appreciate your call and your sincerity. It means more than you know.
A sigh of relief on their end. So you'll come back? We need you, Mom. The kids miss you terribly. We all do. What do you need? Just tell us. This was it. The call. They were acknowledging my absence, my impact, my value. But the old dynamics, the expectation I'd simply slide back into my previous role, still lingered beneath the desperate plea. My dear, I replied, choosing each word with care. My value is non-negotiable, and my time even less so. The line was silent. They were processing. I will be present, I continued, firm but gentle, because I love you,
and I love my grandchildren, but it will be with respect and on my terms. I will no longer be a maid or a mere trinket to be pulled out when convenient. I am a beloved grandmother, a cherished mother, and a woman who has finally found her own worth. I could almost feel them nodding. The air in my kitchen seemed to hold its breath. I will visit the children, I clarified, but not as a live-in nanny. I will enjoy time with them, but I also have my own life, my own pursuits, my own peace. Sunday dinners? Yes, if invited with genuine warmth and not as an obligation. My role has changed. I am not here to be taken for granted, but to be celebrated. Understood? Another pause, longer. My resolve was solid, like the old oak tree outside. This wasn't about punishment. It was about boundaries. Understood, Mom, Daniel finally said, his voice softer, imbued with a new respect. We understand, and thank you. Thank you. Not for giving in, but for holding firm. I smiled, a profound smile that reached my eyes. The weight of years felt lifted. My spirit, once burdened, now soared. I hung up the phone, the quiet returning, richer, more profound. The world hadn't just listened, it had responded. And I, Lucia, had responded too. My freedom wasn't just an idea, it was a living, breathing reality. My freedom wasn't just an idea, it was a living, breathing reality. It manifested in the quiet rhythm of my days, a melody composed of my own choices. The frantic, hurried mornings were gone, replaced by the gentle light filtering through my bedroom window, inviting me to wake at my own pace. I'd rise, the scent of fresh coffee already brewing, a ritual I now savored, not rushed. The clinking of the ceramic mug against the saucer was a small, satisfying sound, a daily reminder that my time was truly mine. My relationship with Daniel and Sarah had blossomed into something truly beautiful, free from the thorny weeds of expectation and unspoken resentments. They visited often, not out of obligation, but out of genuine desire. And little Leo, my grandson, would burst through the door, his laughter echoing through the hall that once felt so empty. I'd scoop him up, feeling the soft weight of his small body, his chubby arms wrapping around my neck. There was no pressure now, no desperate need to prove my worth as a grandmother or a mother, just pure, unadulterated joy. We'd build towering block castles, read stories in the sun-drenched living room, or chase bubbles in the garden, their iridescent sheen catching the light. I was actively present, fully engaged, but I also knew when to step back, to allow them their own family moments without my constant shadow. And then there was the silence, not the oppressive silence of an unlived life, but a comforting hush that held space for my own rediscovered passions. My hands, once tirelessly typing reports, now found solace in the soil of my small garden. The earthy smell, the vibrant colors of blooming hydrangeas and fragrant roses became a grounding force.
I'd spend hours there, feeling the sun on my skin, watching the bees busy themselves. Books, long relegated to dusty shelves, were now my constant companions. I joined a book club, the animated discussions over lukewarm tea, a delightful contrast to the sterile meetings of my past. My friends, many of whom I'd neglected during my years of corporate devotion, resurfaced, their laughter and shared memories a balm for my soul. We'd gather for long lunches, the aroma of garlic and fresh herbs mingling with our animated chatter, a symphony of connection. My home, once a mere dwelling where I collapsed at the end of exhausting days, had transformed. It was no longer an empty shell, echoing with the ghosts of unmet expectations. Instead, it was a tranquil refuge, filled with the warmth of my own presence, the home of contentment. I chose every curtain, every cushion, not to impress, but to create a haven that reflected the peace I finally held within. The crisp air of early morning, the gentle breeze rustling the leaves outside my window, the soft glow of lamplight in the evenings, each moment was savored, a testament to a life consciously chosen, not passively endured. I was finally visible, not just to the world, but most importantly, to myself. I looked directly into the camera now, my gaze steady, resolute. A soft, warm light bathes my face,
a stark contrast to the harsh, unforgiving fluorescent glow of the office I once knew. My heart feels lighter than it has in years, yet heavy with the unspoken stories of countless women who might be watching, feeling the very same shadows I once navigated. If you are 50 and beyond, and you find yourself feeling invisible, like a quiet presence barely noticed in your own home or workplace, undervalued, your lifetime of contributions dismissed with a casual, dismissive wave, silenced by life, by your family, by your work, I understand. I lived that reality, walked that lonely path. I felt the slow, insidious erosion of my spirit, the cruel whisper that told me my time was over, that my opinions no longer mattered, that my very presence was an inconvenience. It's a bitter, sharp pill to swallow, isn't it? To feel your essence shrinking, your vibrant colors fading into shades of gray. The world, with its relentless pursuit of youth and novelty, often tries to tell us that our worth diminishes with each passing year, that our profound experience is somehow outdated, that our voices are too soft, too old-fashioned to be heard in the modern chorus. But I am here, standing before you now, to tell you something profoundly true, something I had to fight tooth and nail against all odds to reclaim for myself. Please remember this truth, not just with your mind, but engrave it deep within your heart. Let it echo in your very soul. You are not furniture. You are not merely an object to be moved aside, relegated to a dusty corner, or ignored when new, shinier, louder things come along. You are not a forgotten relic gathering dust. No, you are a living, breathing, vibrant testament to a life fully lived, to decades of experiences that have shaped you into the magnificent woman you are today. You are a tapestry woven with rich, intricate history, each thread a memory, a lesson learned, a triumph celebrated, a scar that tells a profound story of survival, resilience, and unparalleled strength. You are a repository of profound wisdom, garnered from years of navigating complex challenges, celebrating deep joys, and overcoming heartbreaks that threaten to shatter you. Every gray hair, every line etched around your eyes is not a flaw, but a beautiful roadmap of experience, a symbol of battles won, of unwavering perseverance, and knowledge gained that no textbook can teach. You are a testament to unwavering resilience, a spirit that has bent under immense pressure, but has never, ever truly broken, a strength that has carried you through storms you never thought you'd survive, emerging stronger on the other side. Think of everything you've overcome, every barrier you've pushed through, every person you've nurtured and supported, every dream you've kept alive. That, my dear, is not weakness. That is your undeniable, irrefutable power. You are power.
An unstoppable force, a deep wellspring of untapped potential, waiting to be rediscovered, to be embraced, to be boldly unleashed. Do not let the world, or worse, your own lingering doubts, convince you otherwise. Your voice matters. Your experience is invaluable. Your presence is not just appreciated. It is vital. It is a gift. Embrace who you are in this very moment with all the wisdom and beauty you possess. Stand tall. Let your light shine brighter than it ever has before, illuminating not just your path, but inspiring others. The world desperately needs what you and only you have to offer. Go forth and shine. I remember vividly those days when the world seemed to shrink around me. The heavy silence in my apartment, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator, felt like a physical weight on my chest. I'd sit there, nursing a cup of lukewarm tea, the scent of lavender from an old sachet doing little to soothe the sting of feeling utterly unseen. My decades of experience, the late nights, the early mornings, the sacrifices, they felt like dust in the wind, a ghost in the machine. I'd walk into meetings, clutching my worn leather briefcase, its familiar weight a small comfort, only to have my ideas, my insights, float past like unnoticed whispers. It was as if a veil had fallen, making me transparent. The brisk air conditioning in the office, once a refreshing constant, now seemed to blow right through me, emphasizing my sudden chill of irrelevance. But then something shifted. It wasn't a sudden burst of fireworks, but a slow, steady ember igniting deep inside. I started to hear the whispers not of doubt, but of my own inner strength. The quiet moments became times of reflection, not despair.
I began to understand that my worth was not dictated by a corporate ladder or someone else's opinion. It was inherent. It was forged in every challenge I'd ever overcome, every lesson learned, every hand I'd ever lent. The gentle aroma of fresh coffee brewed in my own kitchen became a symbol of a new beginning, a quiet ritual of self-affirmation. The weight of my own past decisions, once a burden, transformed into the solid foundation of my future. So I implore you, with all the wisdom I've gathered and all the battles I fought and won, don't accept anything less than the recognition you deserve. Your voice matters. Your value is absolutely non-negotiable. Let that sink in. Feel it resonate within you, a truth undeniable, a bedrock beneath your feet. It's not about arrogance. It's about acknowledging the magnificent tapestry of your life. What's your story of overcoming adversity? What were those quiet moments of despair? And more importantly, what were the powerful turning points? Share it in the comments below. Your journey, your resilience, your unique perspective, they are not just stories. They are beacons. Together, we can create a chorus, a powerful testament to the strength, resilience, and brilliance of women 50 and beyond. Our collective narratives will inspire, uplift, and remind us all that our journey is far from over. It's simply evolving, becoming richer, deeper, more authentic. So I implore you, with all the wisdom I've gathered and all the battles I've fought and won, don't accept anything less than the recognition you deserve. Your voice matters. Your value is absolutely non-negotiable. Let that sink in. Feel it resonate within you, a truth undeniable, a bedrock beneath your feet. It's not about arrogance. It's about acknowledging the magnificent tapestry of your life. What's your story of overcoming adversity? What were those quiet moments of despair? And more importantly, what were the powerful turning points? Share it in the comments below. Your journey, your resilience, your unique perspective, they are not just stories. They are beacons. Together, we can create a chorus, a powerful testament to the strength, resilience, and brilliance of women 50 and beyond. Our collective narratives will inspire, uplift, and remind us all that our journey is far from over. It's simply evolving, becoming richer, deeper, more authentic. If you're 50 plus and you've ever felt invisible, or your wisdom has been ignored, remember, you are not furniture. You are power. Reaffirm your value, pursue your dreams, and inspire other women. Life reinvents itself. What will be your next step? Leave your comment and help our community to grow.